You know, the last half a decade or so, bone conduction has been a big deal. You runners have been using it like crazy. But we're gonna have to agree with Oladance. Bone conduction might just be at its end.
We'll compare the spanking new Oladance OWS Sports with two popular and similar products, the Shokz OpenRun Pro and the SoundCore AeroFit Pro. So many pros.
Namaste, we're DHRME. Do headphones really matter, eh? When you got earbuds?
Now, what is the Oladance OWS Sport? It's like a neckband style, headphones with the buds at the end. And these are similar to what you would have seen with the Shokz and products like that. But the big difference are these little things. These are the speakers. So this is air conduction. This is actually a little speaker next to your ear, as opposed to bone conduction, which passes the sound through the bones and through vibrations.
And the way you operate the Oladance is very easy. You got 3 buttons in total. 1 on the left, 2 on the right, and they're very clicky. The 2 on the right is for volume as well as power, and the 1 on the left is what they call a multi-function button, which can be customizable for either play, pause, track control, etc. And you don't need to worry about the rain because they're IPX8 rated. They don't advise swimming with it, but the water resistance is very high. No dust resistance though.
While still on build, this comes with a massive hard case. I mean, it's good, I guess, that it's there, but ain't nobody gonna use that. In terms of battery life, they advertise 15 hours, and we actually tested this with our battery test, and we got just over 14, so that's a legit claim. A downside here is, and you see that with all of these kind of products, is that there is a proprietary charging cable that you're gonna have to deal with. Now, this cable is nice and braided and things like that, but still it has this kind of magnetic charging pin. So if you actually lose this, you're gonna have to shell out money for a new one or maybe buy an aftermarket one. Not as handy as USB Type-C.
And like most open ears, they can be very comfortable until it's not. Because if you're wearing a hoodie, check out the merch, or a coat with a hood or a collar, then the neckband can hit against it and it can be quite annoying, and it pushes against the whole earbuds, and then it can push it away from your ear as well, which is not a great feeling. So that's going to really depend on what kind of ears you have, what kind of head, what kind of clothes you're wearing, etc. And you can also forget about sleeping with it. Not comfortable.
Now, the most obvious comparison for this is going to be the Shokz OpenRun Pro. I mean, do you see the similarity? Both are very similar, similar shape, neckband kind of design, and both have buttons on them in different places, of course. But one interesting difference is that the Oladance comes just in one size, whereas on the Shokz you can get the OpenRun Pro, but you can also get a mini if you have a smaller head. Only difference is that the Shokz, of course, uses bone conduction instead of air conduction. Now, the bone conduction thing was a novel idea when it first came out, right? But after using it for a while, it just isn't so new anymore, and there are clear advantages to air conduction, which we'll talk about. Now, is this Oladance's response to Shokz entering the air conduction space with the OpenFit? Who knows? Oh, and the OpenRun Pro also comes with a hard case that we also never use, because these things are pretty durable, and who wants to lug this around when you can just hang this around your neck? Of course, it also, like the Shokz, has a proprietary charging cable. Now, the IP rating is stronger at IP55, so you also get dust resistance. So if you're a dirty worker outer, in addition to the liquid resistance, you will get some protection from dust as well. However, you don't get as much liquid resistance. So that's the balance. Now, the battery life on the OpenRun Pro is advertised at 10 hours, so that's lower than the Oladance. But we got 11.5 hours, which is decent. So at the end of the day, unless you're using them all day, I don't think you will really notice a difference.
But our favorite one has to be the air conduction SoundCore AeroFit Pro. The neckband it comes with is very able. For one, it's removable, meaning you can ditch it if you don't need it. And number 2, its size is adjustable. Unlike the Shokz and Oladance, makes it so comfortable. And the buds fit into a charging case, which you don't need a proprietary cable to charge, just good old Type-C. And this case also, of course, charges your buds. And although battery life on the buds itself is advertised to be 14 hours, we got just under 10. But because of that charging case, it's a stronger offering. You still get those reliable button controls, but you'll have to do with just 2 buttons in total compared to 3 on the Oladance and Shokz.
If you're really into the neckband design though, you might not fully appreciate the SoundCore, because this is a 2-in-1 that can be used with a neckband. The neckband shape also, it doesn't really close, right? So it's not the same shape around your neck as the other two. And once you want to store the buds in the case, you will need to pop them off the neckband and make sure that you don't misplace the neckband because you don't get a case. Ironic. And it's only IPX5, so less resistance against liquids than the Oladance and no resistance against dust, unlike the Shokz.
Oh, and let's talk about the colors and materials. The Shokz as well as the Oladance come in 4 different colors, whereas the SoundCore AeroFit Pro only comes in 2. So that's something to keep in mind if you're picky about how it looks. And the materials, the Shokz as well as the AeroFit by SoundCore is kind of a combination of hard plastic and rubberized plastic. And all 3 of them have been comfortable for us and hasn't caused any kind of skin irritation or discomfort.
And of course, all 3 of these have sealed, non-user replaceable batteries, and we're going to keep saying that till companies do better, or the EU forces them to.
The OWS Sports is Fuckman friendly. You get multi-point, so you can use these with 2 phones without having to pair them every time. The catch though is that you will have to disable aptX HD. Not the biggest disappointment in our book. And you can't pull connection from a previously paired device. You need to keep holding down the power button when starting up the headphones to put them into pairing mode if you want to connect another device.
The Fuckman will also be pretty satisfied with the controls when on a phone call. Volume is available on the buds. Now, the Shokz and SoundCore can do all of this too, volume and multi-point, but only the Shokz has the power of muting by pressing the volume up and down at the same time. Now, the Oladance advertises muting, and you can even configure one of the button gestures for muting, but maybe it's because we have an early review sample or it's just a bug that hasn't been ironed out. It did not work for us on calls, even though we could select it in the app. I'm guessing it's a bug because it sure as hell ain't a feature.
But what of the mics, you ask? Well, check out our popsicles, icicles, and test popsicle. Ice, icicle. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Starting off with the wind, on the SoundCore and on the Shokz, you could hear the wind and it did now and then interfere with the voice. But surprisingly on the Oladance, the wind rejection was very good. Well, surprising to us, their advertising claims that it is awesome, but that checks out. If anything, you could hear Kevin's bike creaking louder than the wind, and this would be our pick for windy conditions.
It's not the same situation with the noisy cars though. The Shokz was very good. Even though you could hear the background sounds, my voice stayed rich and audible throughout, and it would be our first pick for noisy conditions. The Oladance is interesting. It suppresses the car noise, but I sound like I'm in some hollow cave off in the distance. The funny thing, my voice is still perfectly understandable even though it has that weird effect and lower quality. The SoundCore did very well, but it fell short of the Shokz.
In terms of extras, the Oladance does give you an app, but it's a pretty basic one. You get controls adjustments only for the multifunction button, so you can change what the single, double or triple presses do for media playback or for calls, which is nice that they have that distinction. You do get EQ presets and a custom 5-band EQ. And you of course get a choice between multi-point and aptX HD, and that's pretty much it.
The only one trying to compete for that bare bones app is the Shokz. You can only change EQ presets and see a device list. That's it. And SoundCore has the best of both worlds. In the app, you can have a custom 8-band EQ, spatial audio, and head tracking for whatever that's worth. You can customize the buttons and see the paired device list. None of these headphones sport a wear sensor though, which is par for the course when it comes to neckband style buds.
Let's talk about the sound, because that I think is where this really pulls ahead compared to the Shokz. The max volume on the Oladance is actually quite decent, and you know, the way it's tuned is very usable for music. The EQ presets are good. There's a default which is kind of more balanced, a surging bass which sounds similar to the SoundCore, we'll come to that, and pure voice for podcasts. You also get a 5-band EQ, and you do get aptX HD, so there is a slight difference, but if you disable aptX HD and just use AC, for us it's fairly noticeable on this form factor, to be very honest. Now, sound is good. It's very good, but don't expect too much. Wait till the end of the section to see how it compares with Bone Conduction. I gave you a preview already. It has decent mids. The treble can be a bit sibilant. The bass is present, but overall sounds a bit crowded with average instrument separation. Again, we are talking about open ear neck style earbuds, so we have to temper our expectations. These are not going to be like in-ears, but compared to the Bone Conduction, there's no vibration of the cheekbones that happens, so that's really nice.
Okay, and then we have the Shokz OpenRun Pro. Worst of the lot here, guys. There's no treble to speak of. And you have those incredible vibrations at mid to higher volumes on your cheekbones. And there's just 2 EQ modes, standard and vocal. No custom EQ. And then the SoundCore AeroFit Pro. It's definitely the bassiest of the bunch. Nothing comes close to it. And it's also the loudest too. Second loudest is the Oladance Sports. And the SoundCore has an 8-band custom EQ, but just 2 presets, podcast and treble booster. The treble booster is a weird sounding preset.
So which is our pick? Well, the best product out of the 3, irrespective of price for us, is the SoundCore AeroFit Pro. It sounds good, it has standard charging, but if you're all in with like that neckband design and you want it on all the time, basically, then obviously SoundCore is not going to work because you have to kind of plug and unplug. Then it would be the Oladance, because simply said, sound quality, battery life of course is a bonus, but they sound so much better. I don't know, but that is irrespective of the price. Now, Kevin, what would you choose if price really mattered?
And speaking of prices, we'll put them on screen, but they do tend to change. So check out the links in the description down below. Oladance does have an early bird promotion going on, but you know, Shokz, SoundCore, they also tend to do discounts from time to time. Disregarding price for the moment, I would still pick the SoundCore AeroFit Pro just for the full package. But if you were to consider the price, then I would say the SoundCore AeroFit Pro, because at full price they're still the cheapest on the list and give you the most amount of flexibility because you can remove the headband, you can adjust it, and you have a more full-fledged app.
So the products that you saw today were all sent to us by the respective companies, but we never accept monetary compensation from any of these companies because we are reviewing the products. So we try to keep it as independent as possible. So you guys are actually the real sponsors of this video through your patronage and YouTube membership. Thanks to all of you guys again for supporting us, and a big shout out to our new Fuckman tier members, Hunter and Paula. We really appreciate your support, and we just can't believe how generous and nice you guys are. So thank you so much.
You've been dancing with the air,
and we've been DHRME.
Dooey dooey.
Dooey.
Well, check out our popsicles, icicles, and tests of the mics in noisy and windy conditions.